All right, so welcome to another episode of Mr. Analyst. Of course, I'm Dick Levy, and remember to subscribe to the channel and, of course, like and share our content. We'd really appreciate all of that to keep on the engagement going. And, of course, your comments are always welcome, and we always love to hear your opinions, whether they're critical or not. We want to hear it because we feed off everything so that we can improve and get better as we go along. So, my guest today is no other than the noted cricket analyst, commentator, and author, Reg Perreira. It's been around for decades. I used to listen to Reg as a child growing up. He and Tony Koza would fill my days and my nights when the West Indies were abroad, playing in India, playing in Australia, playing in Pakistan. And now I have an opportunity to engage with him about what's going on with the West Indies and how we can find solutions. What are the solutions to the problems that are currently ongoing with this team, given the challenge that they face? Of course, five T20 international losses to Australia, and right after that, a 2-1 loss to Pakistan, a team also in transition, a team also struggling. So, Reg, thank you so much for joining us. And of course, it's a difficult time for West Indies cricket. But, looking at what happened in a for a team that won two T20 world titles, going into a series against Australians who it's not out of the realm of possibility that they were beatable because we have beaten them in the past. And of course, Pakistan, who are like the West Indies, a struggling team. What are you taking away from these two series that is a cause for concern, but clearly highlights the real challenges that the West Indies face?
Well, let me first of all congratulate you for the start of your program. And I think it will be a major contribution to the whole discussion, especially when we move to track and field and other areas.
Mhm.
Um, I think that the Australian tour was a disaster. It's hard to find any better words. I mean, when you get bowled out for 27, um, it really rocks you. It really rocks you. It will make the great George Headley and the great W's turn in their graves. Um, the bowling looked to be competitive, but the batting seemed to be totally unprepared, not prepared, had no ability to keep the good deliveries from Stark and Hazelwood and Cummins out and try to weather the storm. And I think there's a major worry with our batting department. The players are better than they're looking, but they need help. They certainly need help. The series against Pakistan, disappointing. The trend continues of loss. Um, and my own feeling is that the CARICOM subcommittee should meet the West Indies board immediately because this is time for action. I mean, the West Indies psyche, the West Indies people have been hurt by 27. We were competitive in the bowling, as I said, but oh dear, the batting was very, very hard to take, and the trend continues. That's my feeling. The CARICOM ministers subcommittee must meet the board immediately, Nathan.
All right, so talk to me. The subcommittee meets with the Cricket West Indies board. What is it that you think are workable solutions that they can put forward to the board that the board needs to adopt to start the process of transformation?
Well, the board needs to adapt to nothing because they were quote unquote democratically elected. But if the Prime Minister Motley, Prime Minister Gonzalez, President Ali was to meet with the board and say, listen, let's look at the performance. We cannot go on like this. We need some change. We have to look at the bowling coach. We have to look at the fielding. We're dropping catches. Um, the whole question of the what I call the experiment of Mais Bascom. That has failed. No selectors. One man picking the team. There's enough in the pot for the CARICOM ministers to hold a strong position and ask for change. Ask for change. I mean, Ronald Rogers has been there for 2 decades, and you're seeing men not totally fit. You're seeing men dropping catches. The fielding coach, not the kind of experience we have, and we really need an experienced kind of batting coach. And I think it's very clear that they're asking that Darren Sammy to carry too much. You can't be cooking 3 pots. I mean, I can't cook, but can you imagine a chef trying to cook 3 pots, at one time? And things are overlapping. I mean, for example, Sammy had to come back from Ireland. Didn't see a ball up there because he had to rush back for the preparation. One would have thought, looking at the time, they could have asked Kohli to take over the red ball preparation until Sammy's comes back. So we would have had a week's versus Headley 4-day or 3-day test trial, and we would have been much prepared. That's a very quick response.
You raised a very interesting point there, where at the end of the Australian series, everybody was calling for Darren Sammy's head. And the Cricket West Indies president, Dr. Kishore Shadow, said that the reason why people are calling for Sammy's resignation or calling for Sammy's head was because he's St. Lucia. You reside in St. Lucia. What was the feeling? What was the reaction there? And do you think that was a fair comment from Dr. Shadow?
No, it was a disappointing comment, because whether it was Phil Simmons coaching, whether it was Roger Harper coaching, whether it was Andre Kohli coaching, if the results were the same, they would have gotten the same requests, the same demands, the same cost out would have gone. It has nothing to do with Sammy being from a small island. Sammy being from a small island.
Yeah, so Reg, let's go back to the main point here, because the subcommittee, has made up of heads of some of the territories that feed the West Indies cricket team. You're looking at, Irfan Ali, you said before, Gonzalez, Mia Motley from Barbados, who over the years traditionally produces some of the best cricketers the West Indies has ever seen. Trinidad and Tobago also has been with the likes of Brian Lara and the other greats that have come from those territories. Are you seeing enough from cricket at the grassroots level that we don't have to continue to try to reinvent the wheel, so to speak, with the same players year in, year out, playing on the same bad pitches that, to me, hamper development? Because when you're playing on pitches and your technique is not sound to begin with, you're going to always struggle, because the technique wasn't always there to be able to compensate for those bad pitches. Those are some of the things that I believe need to be fixed. Why do you think that there hasn't been more of a collective or consensus on building a strong grassroots program like we see in India? And of course, this is, against the background that we know we don't have the resources of an India or Australia or Pakistan. But certainly some resources have to be put towards a grassroots program, starting with kids 6 to 10 perhaps, and then building from there and building long term, so that maybe in 10, 15 years, we can produce a team of competent players, consistent players, batters, bowlers, fielders. But we're not seeing that. We're seeing we're trying to pull players from the existing systems that clearly are failing, regardless of where in the territory they're from, and trying to fix a larger problem from a flawed system. Are you getting what I'm saying? I think there needs to be a complete overhaul, starting at the grassroots level, as opposed to trying to find solutions within a system that's currently not working.
We are in the same wavelength, Lisa. I think we spent $1 million on the Breakout series. Now, to me, the Breakout series missed the point, because the majority of the Breakout series was people who played in the 4-day competition. there was one interesting decision that everybody must play a leg spinner, which probably proved to be a positive thing. And we saw a couple of leg spinners. Here's hoping that they're kept within the system. But the breakout and the expenses of the breakout didn't produce the kind of new talent, new names, you know, that you when I look back at the breakout series which was played in Trinidad, I can probably remember about 4 or 5 names that as a high, these are new names. It didn't unearth the kind of talent you're talking about. So there was the wrong focus there. We had too many players who were well known in the Caribbean, who had been seen before, that didn't need to be there. But to come back to the question of the grassroots, um, it's not happening at the women's level. You know, our girls are still learning the game at 17 and 18.
Mm-hmm.
They have not gone to the CARICOM ministers and said, look, we need secondary school girls starting to play cricket at 15. Our girls run track, they play volleyball, they play basketball, they swim, they do everything but play cricket. The rest of the world are doing exactly the reverse. You know, we need to develop, just to follow what you're saying, a grassroots structure for the girls. And, you know, it's an interesting that you have raised the question of our real grassroots. Um, the former West Indies keeper Brown um, has just started in Barbados. This is last weekend. Just started. They're doing a block by block um, program where only 2 players of any experience can be played. The rest have to be brand new from the various blocks, whether it is Christchurch or it is St. Philip or wherever it is. I mean, they have parishes, they have blocks. And I spoke to a colleague of mine, Arnold McIntyre. His father was a well-known man, of course, a CARICOM secretary general. And he said he had gone for crop over and he had gone to see a match and he was amazed. He was amazed to see new faces, new talent, and the community also who was coming out. Now, I don't know if the West Indies board can duplicate that. Because I've been writing to the West Indies board saying, you know, your top clubs, all your top clubs in the affiliates should have a girls' team. That hasn't happened. I mean, I wrote 3 years ago. So, you know, the Liberto in Antigua, the DCC in Guyana, Kingston in Jamaica, they will have a girls' team. Now, straight away, you're putting together about 500 girls, and they must have their separate space. They mustn't be practicing with boys. They must be practicing by themselves and learning the basics. Learning the basics. I mean, to me, the experiment of my basketball has failed totally.
Yeah, but the reason why I asked that question, Rent, and of course I take your point as well, is that there's an example, there's a model in Jamaica, for example, that I think cricket can follow. There's a reason why Jamaica is dominant in the region in track and field and is one of the strongest powerhouses in the world when it comes to track and field. When you look at what happens, for example, through GC Foster, a whole raft of coaches have come through that system and they're spread far and wide in all the schools across the country. So we've seen kids from the prep school championships and the primary school championships matriculating to the high schools, then matriculating to college, whether it's here or abroad. And of course, eventually, those who decide to go pro go pro. You know, so when they're in primary school and prep school, they're learning the basics, the mechanics of the sport, whether it's sprinting, whether it's throwing, whatever the discipline is. They're learning the fundamentals from there. just recently, Shelley and Fraser Price, on it was the week of the national championships, announced that along with Nike, she's going to be doing a program where she's ensuring that all the kids at the primary school level will not be running barefoot anymore. That they'll be getting spikes and stuff like that
Great,
as part
great,
of the program. So what I'm saying is that if cricket, for example, should utilize a GC Foster or any other similar college, whether it's in the UK or Australia, where and train coaches year in, year out, a great batch of coaches who then will go into this individual territories through whether a structured academy or into the high schools or into the prep schools or primary schools, and have the kids start to learn the fundamentals of the game. So by the time they get to high school, they already mastered those fundamentals.
yep, yep,
And then so they're playing in under 15s and they're learning the game in terms of strategy and tactics and all those things because they've already mastered the physical part of the game. And going through into high school, they're learning more about, the overall perception of the game, how to set a field, how to learn about weaknesses of batsmen and bowlers, to exploit weaknesses of opponents and stuff like that. All the different elements that go into to making a first class cricketer. So by the time they get to playing the regional 4-day competitions, they're already significantly experienced with the number of games that they've played. And of course, as part of my vision of it is to have an extended regional competition, not just 10 games a year, but maybe 15, 20 games a year. Maybe start there and then having these kids with so by the time they get to 22, 23, 24, they've already played maybe 100, 150 first class games as opposed to 20 or 30, which is the case that is currently now. We see players going to the West Indies team with maybe 15 or 20 matches under their belts and therefore exposed to, when they're up against Australia, they're exposed to players who are significantly, vastly more experienced than they are, and they're unable to cope. So if we're able to build, I've always believed that you build a strong house from the ground up. You don't build it from the top down or from the middle down. You build
foundation.
a strong, you build a strong foundation and you build on that. And what that allows for is also the idea that you have a constant stream of players coming up. So once players start to transition into retirement, there's always a new crop coming through. Just like how the Australians do. They look at what happens in Australia, for example. It is rare when Australian players make the test team before they're 25 or 26. By then, they're significantly more experienced. They come in already ready to play. They're not learning the game at that level, which is what I think is happening to the West Indies.
Well, I'm glad you said that we can follow the Jamaican model. And I hope you can write tomorrow morning after your first cup of coffee a note to Dr. Bennett and ask him to present the Jamaican model to the next meeting of Cricket West Indies. It's not reinventing the wheel. I mean, we all know about the Jamaican story. We all know about the Jamaican story. And it started maybe before 1948 with McKinley and Wint and things like that. So why can't we apply the Jamaican story? There's another level which we really need to touch on. Schoolboy cricket has gone through the Edos, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when I was at the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States Sports Desk, I got United Insurance to sponsor secondary school in every OECS country. That, I'll cut the chase. That school system by United Insurance and later Massey produced 36 test players.
There you go.
I checked recently with a couple of the member states where there used to be 12 schools playing, and I wouldn't call the name of the countries, they're now down to 5. So a secondary school that produces the Larrells and the Hoopers and the Jimmy Adams, and you can go down the line. Secondary school cricket needs to be upgraded and have a focus. I don't know about the Jamaica system, but let me ask you, how much secondary school cricket is played, and is there a sponsor?
Well, there's a Grace Shield, but one of the challenges I was actually during Professor Hilary Beckles' presentation of his latest book about Frank Warren. He and Mark Nita had a conversation that I was within earshot of, actually, it was right there, where Mark Nita was concerned about the fact that when he was growing up, there were more than 60 high schools in Jamaica playing cricket. Now
That's it.
it's down to about 20 schools,
My God.
which means that there are fewer players playing now because of, obviously when the Western is not doing well, there is less interest in the sport. We've seen it in the stands because the Westerns have been losing for the better part of 30 years now. The stands are empty when we're playing, as opposed to the time during the Lara era, up until '95. I remember I was at Savannah Park in '95 when we lost that series to Australia 2-1, and even then the Headley stand was filled. The other stands were filled, but that was the beginning of the end. But now we don't even see crowds in the stadium anymore.
Yeah,
Right across the region.
I will always remember that test match because I was there. Why did we bat first? The owner should have been in Australia to make the front running. I mean, we had the the Frank World Trophy in our hands. We
Yeah,
batted. We lost the game then, but I think we need to go back to the point we're talking about.
yeah,
Secondary school cricket in every country. And the present sponsors of West Indies Cricket, which is an insurance company that took over from United Insurance, the West Indies board should ask to sponsor secondary school cricket. It's a natural
absolutely.
follow-up. It's a natural
Naturally,
follow-up.
I agree with you entirely on that because I think the greater support we have at the grassroots level, the increase in the likelihood that we'll be able to produce quality cricketers going into the Western Indies setup. Because look, we've seen, like for example with the academy that was sponsored by Sagicor, we saw some good cricketers come through, but the development wasn't complete yet, and they've fallen by the wayside. So we need to have a more comprehensive system, I believe, where there's a seamless transition from one level to the next until you make it into the test team. And because and the bigger challenge I think, and I think we probably have to discuss it at another time, Reg, because we're running out of time very quickly here, is the idea that a lot of players are now using the West Indies platform to get seen by Brian Lara said it the other day, and I agree with him. They're
Yeah,
using the
it,
West Indies platform to get attracted to the IPL and the other T20 leagues around the world, and
it was
then
an
abandon the
honest
West Indies.
it was an honest statement coming from them because it is the West Indies on the 13, on the 15, on the 17, on the 19 that produce these players, and then
Absolutely.
as soon as they do well, I mean, and the ICC is giving away franchise license like hot cakes. I mean, some of the levels are very poor, but a man could go and earn $100,000 US, and you got to understand the vortex we find ourselves. But um, certainly the 4-day tournament is just too short. The 4-day
Hmm.
tournament has not been sponsored for the last 2 decades.
A
You know,
long, long time.
yeah, and there's a huge drain. There's a huge drain on the coffers of the West Indies. And I wrote to a president, and I wouldn't call names, and I said, please look at the possibility of going down to Guyana and see if you can get ExxonMobil to sponsor our 4-day cricket. They are sponsoring events in Guyana. I
Hmm.
attended the Pan Am Indoor Hockey Championships sponsored by ExxonMobil. You know,
Yeah, and there's
um,
money there.
there's money there, but you got to be proactive. You got to be proactive. I mean, and we're hearing deals with courts. We're hearing we signed this deal. We do not get the background to how much is the deals. What are we really gaining from the deals? It's not the Western Board have now signed this. We need to know basically, what kind of deal we have gotten.
Absolutely. Reg, I'm afraid we're out of time, but I have to leave it there. But certainly we'd love to come back and have a further discussion on this because clearly there is a challenge of finding solutions for what's ailing West Indies cricket. And someone like you, and of course, we can have the conversations, and hopefully those conversations are spread far and wide. That then we start to look at the real solutions and how we can turn West Indies cricket around. Because, like you, I mean, I know you're much my senior, much more my senior, because when you were
Don't make me feel so old to you.
no, but I started listening to West Indies cricket when I was, I don't know, 7 or 8 years old, and I didn't even know who the players were, but I was so engaged by it. I remember, scoring cricket matches in the middle of the night and too tired when I was at school the next day because I was up all night listening to the West Indies playing in India. And I remember, I can tell you this, back in 1983-84 series against Australia when we had won the series, but we were leading 3-0. We drew the fourth test and we lost the last test. And I remember going to school in tears that we lost the test, let alone the series. So, it's cricket is part of our DNA, it's our passion. And I think, Michael Holding said it best. We took the game of our colonial masters and we became the best at it. And I think we don't have that feeling anymore, unfortunately. And I think we need to try to get that back.
If you allow me to tell you a little story about the West Indies playing Pakistan, and Chris Daring told me, and it's a good story. He said he came out and Roberts had just joined Murray, and he said he can miss the bus. He can catch the next bus. Roberts and Murray still batting. The next bus passed, he still didn't catch the bus. The third bus passed, Murray is still batting and thing. Eventually, Roberts takes a signal. When he goes home, I think he's gonna get a bollocking. As soon as he goes through the door, the father said, "We won, we won, we won." But just before we finish, I'm looking at what they will do for the matches in Trinidad. Is Hetmai going to come back? He's supposed to be injured. Is King is going to come back? We haven't heard Gooley's name. Gooley was picked to go to England, couldn't get a visa. He's disappeared. Jangu, we need to shake up the batting a bit. The bowling
Absolutely.
seems to be taking care of itself. But it was a pleasure to be on, and of course, I always remember Jamaica way back. I went by a rice boat to Jamaica in 1959, and
Yes.
I always, as you know, have the highest regard for Lady de la Pena, who probably
Yep.
had a major impact on my life in 1973.
Yep. We'll talk more about that next time, Reg. Thank you so much for joining us. And of course, to you, the listeners, and of course, the viewers, remember to subscribe, like, and share our content. And of course, leave your comments below. Tell us what you think about what we can do to save West Indies cricket. But until next time, this is Nathan Lewis saying goodbye, and we'll see you next time on Mr. Analyst.